Welcome to the Mental Health Merienda, your snack size guide to mental health wellness. I'm Dr. Adeline Leon, licensed clinical psychologist specializing in neuropsychology.
And I'm Michelle Young, licensed clinical social worker. So, for today's episode, we wanted to do something a little bit more casual. The holidays are coming up, and we thought let's just kind of chat about how to survive the holidays. Because the holidays, even though it's a fun time, to gather with family and things like that, it's also stressful, especially if you celebrate Christmas because there's buying presents and things like that. So yeah, how are you doing this holiday season?
I'll definitely say for myself, my husband and I have a few things to navigate. We don't have children, so I think that makes a big difference in terms of not having time. Just reading through some of people's comments and what people have to say online, it seems like a lot of what people are really stressed by is not having time during the holidays. It's supposed to be a really happy time. That's the intention, especially with kids. You want to make it really happy for your kids. And so there's a lot of events that come with that, but then that can come with a lot of stress and a lot of time constraints. And so for myself, thankfully, we've been okay with managing that. But Michelle, how's it been for you with having children, especially in navigating all of that?
Oh, yeah. I'm hanging in there.
Okay. You're still with us.
I'm with us. I'm here. It's definitely, it could be definitely challenging, but luckily this year, not too bad. I mean, there has been a lot more events, like so every weekend, there's something in addition to like things that we're already doing, right? So I have two kids and they also play sports. So on top of like already like every weekend, we're already kind of doing those activities. Then you kind of pile on top of that, like some holiday activities. And I think for me, I think I'm sure other parents can agree and probably do this too, but I think you just have to pick and choose. You have to pick and choose. You can't go to every single event. So that is something my husband and I talk about, our, the family as a whole will talk about, like, what events are like a must that we will go to? What are events that, unfortunately we can't go to because we have to prioritize, responsibilities? Like, for example, you know, sometimes we even have to split up. So actually, one of our friends hosted a gingerbread making event, which we do every year, and it's really fun. But unfortunately, we had to split up because my daughter and husband had her sports responsibilities. So it's just like myself and my son ended up going. So we just we kind of that was kind of like
It's a
the
compromise.
compromise. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we make it work. Sometimes we have to compromise and maybe like split us up or, say no in some situations. So I think that's kind of all you can do to not feel too overwhelmed or feel like you're kind of like drowning in all the events, is that there's some that you have to say no to. And then there's some where maybe like some people go, some people might not be able to go because of other responsibilities. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that setting boundaries is definitely something that we mentioned it quite a few times in our Thanksgiving video, which if you haven't watched that, our navigating family dynamics video that we posted right around Thanksgiving, we'll link that below. So definitely make sure to check that out. But, I think with setting boundaries, one thing I struggle with that. I'm getting better as I get older and as I try to prioritize self care. But I think especially setting boundaries with family members, and even more so when they're older family members. And I think culturally, for myself, being Latina and my parents are Cuban and Dominican, and I think for you as well, Michelle, with being
Yeah.
Filipino and Chinese, that a lot of the cultural expectation is that you are respectful to your elders and that
Oh,
you
definitely.
I think setting boundaries can be something that can be seen as disrespectful and can be really hard. I know I still struggle with setting boundaries with my parents. I do it, but I feel some level of apprehension about it. And so,
Yeah.
what do you think about that? Like, has that been something that's been especially hard for you?
Yeah, and not just during the holidays, but kind of just like over time. Because when you get married, and I know you got married more recently than I did, you kind of have to set that expectation that you're not going to do everything that your mom or your dad or whomever wants you to do, because now you have your own like nuclear unit that you're going to set your own traditions and things like that. And yeah, I think it's one of those things that just gets easier over time. And I think those are one of those things that you and your partner having a united front, so that you both, okay, like, we're going to say no to this thing. We agree that we're going to say no, and we're going to have each other's back. So if there's any pushback from, someone in our family, then we're kind of united together, saying, like, you know what, we both decided together that we're not going to do this thing. We're sorry, we're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings, but we just don't have the bandwidth or the time, or whatever it is, to attend or to participate. So I think it helps to, have that united front with your partner in terms of setting boundaries.
Totally agree. Because my husband is so supportive when it comes to that, and again, I think that sometimes we grow up with certain cultural expectations that you're not even aware that it's related to culture. My husband is white, just for context. And I think some things that I felt really bad about, or that I would feel guilty about, maybe I'm not a good daughter, or maybe I'm not, not kind of meeting my expectation. And I've come to find, as I gotten older, that a lot of that is our cultural differences. And so just really putting those boundaries, I think, can be difficult. I think for me, one thing that can be helpful when it comes to placing those boundaries is saying something like, I really wish we could go. I'm sorry that we can't go. We agree, my husband and I, that we have some other things that we need to do instead. But how about we do this? So no,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
offer
we
an
can't go to
alternative.
your home. Right. Offer an alternative. Yeah. Like, obviously, we can't go to your home for this. Unfortunately, we can't go to your home for this dinner, but how about we get together on this day? So I know for his family, it's really hard for everyone to get together on Christmas. All of his siblings are married with children. And so one kind of compromise is that everyone agrees to another date that they get together to exchange gifts. And it tends to be it could be a week and a half, a week before Christmas. And that, I think, is a good compromise. Because it's hard. You have to navigate everything with your partner too, and they have their family, you have your family, and then you have your own nuclear family, and so that's a lot to navigate.
Yeah. So one of the things that we try to do in our family, so my husband is Filipino for context, and he has a really big family. My family is also pretty big, which I think the term big is subjective, but we both do have relatively big families. So what we have to do is, for his side of the family, there's a Christmas in January, and that's one of the things that we try to make it work, because on their side there's so many. Yeah, it's a nice compromise. There's a lot of people with their own families and things like that, and so that's become like a tradition in their families, for all the cousins to get together in January, because that's really the time that ends up working for everyone. It's kind of past all the December stuff.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you want as many people as possible to be able to make it and to be as stress-free as possible. And so when you think back to what is this holiday really about? And when I say holiday, whatever, whether it's, we're mainly talking about Christmas, but whatever holiday might be that you celebrate, Hanukkah or anything else, but it's about spending time with family and having that joyful time and that quality time together. And so if that means having it, like in my husband's family's case, having it a week in advance, or in your husband's family's case, having it a month later, then you're still spending that time together. That's what matters.
Yeah. And I like too that you're all offering that alternative, right? You're not just saying no and then like kind of seems like you're blowing someone off. It's like, I can't, but like, here's an alternative thing that we can try to work out. So I think that also shows that on both parties that you're trying to see each other and spend time with each other, and spend that quality time, like you're saying.
Yeah. And do you have any other tips that you use to help with managing time with holidays and events and the kids?
I think one that's, I think a simple one that everyone, could incorporate, or probably already do, is just making sure that everything's on a calendar, right? Like every event is on a calendar, even the ones that maybe you might say no to, but that way you can kind of like map out, like in the week, like, okay, like on Saturday coming up, we have like 5 events. So which one are we going to prioritize? Which ones are we going to, maybe spend like a little bit of time here and there at the first event? And then if we want to go to the second one, we'll, try to figure that out. So I think you just kind of, as much as possible, trying to stay organized is also one of the ways to try to not feel like you're overwhelmed during this time of year.
I think that's something that my husband and I are still working on, with being more organized. As you know, Michelle, I'm not naturally the most organized person. Uh, but I think, again, I can relate this to many things, including my not really being as organized. Is to give yourself grace. I try to give myself grace as much as possible. It's hard, especially when you have so much on your plate, and it could be even harder to give yourself that grace when you are feeling very stressed and overwhelmed. But as much as possible, just knowing that it's supposed to be a really happy time, but that also means a lot of stress, a lot of events, a lot of time constraints. And it's okay if you can't make it to everything. It's okay if you're not perfectly organized. We always work on being better and having that growth mindset where I will learn from this experience, I will grow from this, and I'll do better next time. That's what I try to incorporate with myself. I try to have that mindset.
Yeah, no, I think that growth mindset is definitely something that all of us can incorporate. It's not being hard on yourself, like, oh, I messed up, right? I didn't make it to these things, or are they mad at me? It's kind of like, okay, like I didn't make it this time. Something slipped, but I am going to learn from this. So next time it's not going to happen, or I'm going to get better and better as I go. So I think that's an important thing to incorporate.
I think another thing that can be more specific to this holiday season versus Thanksgiving, when we posted our family dynamics episode, is just the rise of consumerism and gift giving, which we also have an episode about that, about trying to prevent and avoid, or trying to prevent overspending. That'll be also linked below, so definitely make sure to check that out. I think it's very relevant too. But with gift giving, I know I've had the experience where someone gives me a gift and I don't have a gift for them, and the awkwardness. Yeah, the awkwardness that comes with that, or if it's a gift that's much more expensive than I thought it would be. I know for myself, I going through a PhD program, you don't have much money, and you're kind of broke, essentially, honestly, for a pretty long time. So I know for myself, the way that I navigated that awkwardness is that I was very, very honest about my situation, and I'm so grateful. Thank you. I unfortunately didn't bring anything for you. I don't have a job. And I'm not bringing in an income.
Honest. Just being honest,
Yeah.
like upfront and honest, and like not having any apologies for. I mean, it was what it was at the moment, right?
Right. Yeah.
So another thing that groups of friends or even family members, when they get together, can also consider, instead of kind of this gift giving, is also doing alternative kind of gifts. So things like, you know, doing an activity together as a family. Like, I know one of the things I mentioned earlier was, my friends and I, we do like a gingerbread making, decorating event with our kids, which they all enjoy, even up until they've gotten older. Or another thing that my family has done is kind of do a get together where we all go like hiking. We live in California, so the weather permits. I don't know about, other parts, maybe like a snowman making or sledding kind of activity would also suffice in those situations. But these kinds of alternative gift ideas is something more about spending time together, which we just, we saw that that's actually the thing that people enjoy the most about the holidays is time spent with loved ones. So I think those are also things, groups of friends can also think about, is like, can we do an activity together? Or what we're doing is spending time together, which is really like what makes the holidays so enjoyable, rather than this like, okay, let's buy everyone gifts and their kids gifts, and and then like you have to figure out everyone's wish list, and like I feel like that's the part that like sometimes gets really stressful, and it's like the consumerism part that a lot of people don't like also about the holidays, right?
Yeah, it's the obligation of giving a gift. I think that's what's difficult, because the data also shows that a lot of people feel burdened by gift giving, and they can't afford it, financially burdened. And so, but it's this social expectation that we all have, that we think everyone, or actually, I should rephrase that, a social expectation that we think everyone else has of us. But if you agree with friends or family ahead of time to do things differently, then you can relieve some of that stress for everyone. And I think for the most part, people would be really appreciative of that.
Yeah, so I think these activities and these outings are a really great idea to incorporate. And another one that I think people might want to consider is like a cookie exchange. Have you ever done something like that, Adeline?
I love cookies, and
Me too.
yes,
Me too.
yes, I have. I'd like to do more.
Yeah. Or if you don't like cookies, which how can you not? But if you don't like cookies, like a dessert exchange. But that was also something that my friends and I incorporated this year instead of, again, that burden of like buying all the kids gifts and or doing a gift exchange and having to add another present to buy is, like let's just bring cookies. And then at the end, everyone kind of grabs, all the different things that people have baked or bought. Again, like no pressure. It's whatever, you can do at the moment. And I think everyone like really enjoyed that is kind of like how can you not? And you don't have that pressure too of like having to, buy gifts, wrap gifts, what does everyone want? And I think too, when you know people really well and you care about them, you want to make sure to give a thoughtful gift. And so I think that's also part of what makes it hard is that you're really thinking about like, what would they like? Would they like this? If I kind of spend like a little bit less money, are they going to take offense to that? So I think that kind of takes away that whole burden. Just having, an activity or a cookie exchange, something like that is also, something to consider during the holiday season. So another thing that comes up during this time of year is just navigating family dynamics. And especially if, you have to think about culture, you might have a different culture than like your partner or, the family that you married into. So how about you, Adeline? Is that something that has an impact on you?
Most definitely. I think with our channel and Mental Health Merienda, a lot of what we think about, and it's very relevant to our lives with the fact that we incorporate a merienda and a snack and Tagalog and Spanish into our title, is that culture and those cultural differences when it comes to these conversations. So for myself, my parents don't speak English, they speak Spanish, and my husband does not speak Spanish. So I think one thing with this that can be so just something to navigate, doesn't have to be a challenge, is the language barrier. And so having situations where you have different family members speaking different languages that maybe not everyone understands. And so what we tend to do is with my parents who don't speak English, we all obviously speak to them in Spanish. My husband is okay with the fact that he can't engage in that conversation. I translate anything for him as much as I'm able to. But to be honest, he doesn't even really ask me to do that because he also realizes that if I'm involved in translating, that I'm not really engaged in the conversation as fully. I think that's what can be very hard. That was very much my experience as a child, is always being and actually I should say interpreting is really the word. I was always the interpreter. Even as a child. And so I think that can contribute to a lot of different feelings of being very parentified and a lot of pressure. And my husband knows that that's been my experience. So he's completely understanding about that. And so after the fact, I do tend to give him a little bit of a synopsis of things. But when there are groups where everyone is bilingual, then we do speak in English so that my husband can then be engaged in the conversation and participate. So I think for us, that's something that we've done. But, I know for your family with being Filipino and Tagalog, is that something that you deal with too?
Yeah, sometimes. So we have people in our family that, aren't Filipino or, so sometimes, they're, people are speaking in Tagalog because that's just, what they're more comfortable with. And I think if I notice that, maybe someone might be left out, I'll try to just kind of, okay, they're talking about this. It's not, it's not really anything that pertains or whatever. So trying to, act as the interpreter, kind of as you're saying. But I want to go back to you and your husband's dynamics. One of the things that stood out to me is how understanding, and I know your husband's very understanding, and it's one of the reasons why you married him. But that he kind of just gives you that grace that okay, I'm already I'm not going to expect you to interpret every little interaction, and he's okay with that and not putting that pressure on you. That was something I think is a nice thing that he's aware of. And as much as our partners can be understanding and aware of some of the cultural differences and dynamics, that does help a lot.
I agree, Michelle. I think that my husband I'm very fortunate to have a husband who's really, really understanding. And I think that's what can make these situations much easier to navigate, with having families where you have a mix of cultures is having that understanding of each other and not having expectations and putting pressure on each other. And so that makes things so much easier for me and much more enjoyable. And he has a point. It would interfere with my ability to fully engage with my family. But something else that I think about when it comes to family dynamics and setting boundaries, like we spoke about earlier, especially when culture is involved, is I don't know about you, Michelle, but in Latino culture, there's very much an expectation of respecting your elders, and the elders have the authority. And something that is very different from like white American culture, where once you're an adult, you're an adult. For me, I'm an adult, but but I'm
But you're
always
also a
younger
daughter.
than my mom and my dad. Exactly.
You're a
I'm always
daughter.
going to be a daughter.
Same
I
here.
could be 60,
Yeah.
70 years old. I'm still a daughter. And
Yeah.
so how do you navigate that with like those setting boundaries with elders, especially? Because I think that's especially hard within our cultures.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I think too in like my culture where again, like I'm a full-fledged adult. I have children even, and I'm still like, someone's daughter. So then I do, sometimes feel like I have to, consider, my parents and even my aunts and uncles, like their like expectations. And I think for me, at least, I don't know if this is like the right way or the wrong way, but this is kind of how it's worked for me is again, like just having that united front with my husband and then just being very clear, like, what are things we're okay with doing? What are things we're not okay with doing? You know, what are the compromises in between that, like, okay, like maybe we're not going to do X, but we're okay with doing Y together and just making sure people are okay with that. And I think too, as time goes on, I think that at least the elders in my family kind of realize like, oh, okay, yeah, you guys are adults. You guys have, your own thing going. And then they end up respecting it. I think I'm pretty fortunate that I don't have family where you're feeling pressured to do something that you don't want to do, that maybe people don't like to hear the no, right? Because when you set boundaries, sometimes you do have to say no and set a boundary, but they eventually understand and we can move past it. So I think that's also maybe luck on my part, but I think again, you do have to have that uncomfortable conversation, setting the boundary in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think back to something that we discussed in the family dynamics video, where when you have an uncomfortable interaction with a family member, particularly an older family member, also having compassion for them and keeping in mind that these are dynamics they've had with you for a long time. So like you kind of referred to, like you referred to before, Michelle, I've been married about almost 2 years. It's, I'm not necessarily newlyweds, but close to the newlywed stage. And so my family they're used to me being married, but for the majority of my life, I have not been married. So the dynamics that I've had with them for the majority of my life for about 39 years was that I was not married. And this is a new dynamic for them. The fact that I now have a husband and I have in-laws and I have his family, and we want to spend time with his family as well over the holidays, and also with presenting that united front with him. But I think if you remain consistent with it, it does take a bit of time sometimes, but really being gentle and compassionate about that other person's point of view, but still remaining firm and consistent and having that balance, I think is really what's helpful with that.
Definitely. And I agree. And I've been married for like, oh, wait, hold on. 13 years? I don't know. I forgot. It's been so long.
A while.
Oh, it's been, double digits in numbers. But as you're talking, I'm remembering back to like when we were newlyweds, when we were only like a year or 2 years in. And that's kind of like when it was not challenging, but where we did have to set those boundaries and be firm on those, because now, years down the road, that expectation has been set. So they see us, for the most part as adults and as, fully functioning adults with our own children. And so, and I think at this point now, those boundaries have been respected this whole time. So it's worked out pretty well. So kind of to your point, having compassion, people have to get used to that change in that relationship dynamic, but then also kind of just being consistent, and people eventually get used to it.
Yeah, and I think that having that consistency, having that support from your partner, I think my husband has been very flexible and very open-minded. I think he really needed to be in order for our marriage to work. But even the fact that we don't celebrate, in Latino culture, we don't celebrate Christmas on the 25th. We celebrate the night before, which is Nochebuena, which is Christmas Eve. And so
we do that too.
And midnight. Oh, you do too. Okay.
In the Filipino culture, yeah. Yeah, we celebrate on Christmas Eve, and then like everyone stays up till like midnight. And then it's like kind of like, yay, now it's actually Christmas, and then pass out presents, and then all the kids open their presents, so they stay up like super late, like a lot later than
which is
regular.
Really cool for the kids.
Yeah.
It's a night that you get to stay up really late.
Yeah, with your cousins, with family, so it's fun. And then in my family we play like really like fun games. The adults do, so we're entertained the whole time. But yeah, we have a similar tradition where it's not on Christmas Day; it's actually on Christmas Eve, where we celebrate Christmas. All right, so that's all we have for today. Again, this was a much more casual, just kind of chatting about how to survive the holiday season. So hopefully all of you enjoyed this more casual vibe that we were trying to go for. If you enjoy more videos like this, please comment below and like and subscribe. And again, we'll link below our 2 videos that are kind of related to this. We have a video already on navigating family dynamics during the holidays, which we released around Thanksgiving. And then we also released one about overspending, how to prevent overspending during the holiday season. So hopefully those 2, and then also this one can be helpful, tips to survive the holiday season.
And thank you for joining us again on Mental Health Merienda. We hope you have a really happy holiday, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.